Now, I'm not having a sex change operation. I'm perfectly happy the way I am. You're confusing me with Mr. Producer here. Landmark Legal Foundation, the conservative legal foundation of which I am so proud to be president with such a wonderful group of people, top-line lawyers. Today we have filed a complaint and a request with the Internal Revenue Service for an investigation of the National Education Association. Now, let me explain to you what's going on here. Landmark, I'm reading from the cover letter, requests that the IRS investigate the conduct and tax filings of the National Education Association, Internal Revenue Code IRC 501c5, for tax-exempt labor groups. Yes, they're tax-exempt. Including the NEA, are required to disclose fully to the public, union members, non-union fee payers, and the IRS the extent of the organization's political activities and expenditures. Moreover, political activities and expenditures made in furtherance of such activities are taxable to those organizations unless they are segregated from general operations revenue and conducted through a separate, segregated fund. In other words, they're not free just to take, if you're a union member, your union dues and just throw it around for political purposes. They have to have it in a separate fund. And if it's being used for political purposes, with certain exceptions, which I won't bother you with, they have to pay income taxes on it, corporate income taxes. And they file their tax returns under penalty of perjury, just like you do every year. Now, the NEA acknowledges on its 2008 IRS Form 990 tax return, that's what they use, a 990, that it has spent general operating funds, I repeat, general operating funds on taxable political activities. As demonstrated in this complaint, at least a portion of these funds are subject to taxation and are required to be reported on an IRS Form 1120 PLOL. So in other words, you can't just slop all this money into a slush fund for general operating purposes, then use a portion of it for political activities. You're required to file a separate form, an 1120 POL, and to detail what those political activities are and pay federal corporate income taxes on it. Although the NEA reports spending general operating funds on taxable political activities, it has neglected to file a Form 1120 POL and failed to pay the accompanying tax of these expenditures. Specifically, in its 2008 tax return, Form 990, covering the period from September 1, 2008 through August 31, 2009, the NEA reports $7,714,284 in political expenditures. And the NEA describes these expenditures as follows, quote, communications to members concerning identifiable federal and non-federal candidates, mobilizing members to vote for endorsed federal and non-federal candidates, public legislative advocacy referring to identifiable non-federal candidates. Therefore, according to information supplied in its own tax return, the NEA expends nearly $8 million on three types of activities it classifies as political expenditures. The NEA does not, however, characterize any of these activities as exempt function activities under federal law, which would make these expenditures subject to taxation under the Internal Revenue Code. At least one and possibly two of the above referenced activities constitute taxable exempt function activities and are subject to taxation. Although the NEA has reported these expenditures, it has failed to pay the appropriate tax and should therefore be sanctioned. Moreover, Landmark requests that the IRS begin an immediate investigation to determine the extent to which the NEA is using general treasury funds to mobilize its members to engage in partisan activities. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is why the outgoing general counsel of the NEA, Bob Shannon, hated Landmark Legal Foundation. Yes, as a public service to you, the American people, and frankly to the American teachers throughout this country, we have forced the NEA through the Internal Revenue Service to pay, as you liberals like to say, the fair share in taxes. And let me remind you that we don't do things frivolously at Landmark. I don't do things frivolously. I don't have time for frivolity. And in fact, I can't even say it. But here's the NEA General Counsel, Bob Shannon, at NEA's annual meeting on July 2009 and why he hates us. Cut 7, go.
But NEA has changed as well. And to me, one of the indications of this change is that I have found it increasingly necessary to spend time defending NEA and its affiliates against attacks from government agencies, conservative and right-wing groups, and unfriendly media. So much so that it brings to mind the old question, are we paranoid or is someone really after us? The answer is we are not paranoid. Someone really is after us. During the Bush administration, for example, NEA was audited by the Internal Revenue Service repeatedly. It was investigated by the Department of Labor, and it was called a terrorist organization by the Secretary of Education. Now that the Bush administration is history, that type of governmental harassment will stop. But attacks by conservative and right-wing groups will continue unabated. The Landmark Legal Foundation will continue to file charges alleging that we have violated election campaign law.
Listen to that. He's not only the former general counsel of the NEA, he's Nostradamus. See, at the IRS, NEA,